right into our presentation. What I do now is I do several things. One, somebody said, "Do you still preach?" I said, "Yeah, I still preach." And so I still preach around the country, and I do coaching and consulting for churches and leaders. I do leadership development for churches. I do strategy for churches, because a lot of times we have vision, but we don't know how to put the strategies to achieve the vision together. And so I do that for people. I do some personal coaching for some pastors, because in many cases, when you as a leader, when you as the set man or woman stop growing, your church stops growing. When you stop growing. Now, there may be such a gap between who you are and who your church is that you don't feel it now, but either one of two things are going to happen. Your church is not going to keep growing, or they're going to grow and the gap continues, or they're going to grow and catch up with you. And once they catch up with you, then you've plateaued. You've plateaued, and no matter what you do, and no matter how much you sweat, no matter how much you holler, you are running in place. And so I'm struggling now with what I'm doing for cardio, because my knees have gone bad, and so I can't run anymore. All that concrete pavement over the years has taken its course, but I don't like treadmills. And the reason I don't like treadmills is because you're sweating, but you're still in the same place. And so if I've got to exert energy, I want to move. I want to see something else. I want to go on another street. I don't want to be running for 30 minutes and I'm in the same place. And so if we're not careful, in many cases, if we don't grow, so I do some executive coaching in that for pastors and that. The other thing that I do is, and I've just had to accept this, and we'll talk about identity and all of that a little later. I've just had to accept the fact that I'm an author. I've just had to accept that. Because when I wrote my first book, I asked God, am I an author or did I just write a book? Because everybody who writes a book ain't an author. That's not your assignment. That's not, you can help people, and that's good, but it's become my assignment now. And so what we do is we put out content, because I'm a real proponent that everybody, and is actually the vision and mission of my personal ministry as well as my business, I'm a real proponent that everybody should have a good chance to be their best self. And so I work with people, I work with cities, I work with nonprofits and all of that to give people a chance to be their best self. And everybody does not get. There are a whole bunch of neighborhoods where our people do not get a chance to be their best self. There are a whole lot of children, because of who their parents are, they will not, in that house, they will never get a chance to be their best self. And so I work my tail off every day, whether it is mentoring, whether it is putting out content, whether whatever it is, whether it's coaching, whether it is my radio shows, or whether it is my television segments. I try to get people to have a chance to be their best self. And so we'll talk a little bit about that later. So we're in this whole development piece. I've got some key questions for the pastors first. We're going to jump off and then we'll get to everybody else. Number one, if you had all of the people you want, if your church was the size that you think it's supposed to be, if you had the building you want, if you had the budget that you wanted, if in your services people got saved, healed, and delivered, they got breakthrough, and if you had personally the kind of bankroll and lifestyle you wanted to live, if you had the audience you want, the building you want, budget you want. People were getting saved, healed, delivered from your ministry. Services were like you wanted them to be, and you had the financial wherewithal that you really want. What else would you want? What else would you want? What else would you want? Because what I've discovered in 30 years in church all my life and 30 years of preaching and all that I've discovered is that in many cases, when you get past the bodies in the seat, the buildings, the budget, the bankroll, and the breakthroughs, we don't want nothing else. Because we spend most of our ministry trying to get that. So if the place is full every week, and I got the money that I need, and the budget is what I hope and dream, what else do you want? And in many cases, we haven't thought past that. I've got some more questions. I'm a very Socratic teacher, so I'm gonna ask a lot of questions. Here's some other questions. Number one, why does your church exist? I didn't say why does the church exist. Why does your church exist? Why does it exist right now? Not why it existed 20 years ago, not who the founder was. Why does your church exist right now? Second question. What is your church's kingdom assignment in your region? What is your church's kingdom assignment? You know, we read the letters of Paul, and Paul writes to the church at Ephesus, the church at Thessalonica, the church at Corinth. And as these scholars know much better than me, these letters are passed around to the different congregations because in the city was one church. And that church manifested itself in different congregations that in many cases were held in homes. That's why we're called the household of faith. Because in the first century, many of the churches were in people's homes. That's why Luke says in Acts, and they went from house to house breaking bread. That wasn't after church. That was church. That was church. So God has a church in Sumpter. God has a church in Cleveland. God has a church in Orlando. God has a church. Now, there could be hundreds of congregations, but God has a church in the city. Now, based upon God having a church in the city, what position on the team does your church play? Because I got to know why we're here. I got to know, does your church play quarterback? Does your church play a lineman? Does your church play tight end? What is the role of your church in the overall kingdom effort of whatever region God has told you to touch? Because if I don't know what position my church plays in the entire kingdom work, then I'm out shooting by myself. And guess what? When you go to the court and you shooting by yourself, you real good. I ain't got no help in this room. You real good. You real good. More questions. If you know what your kingdom assignment is in the region, has that assignment changed recently? And if it changed, did you change your congregation for the assignment? Or is your congregation built for the last assignment? Now, another question. how do we become more impactful? We talked about relevancy a little bit last night. How do we become more impactful? Because here's what I had discovered. There's a difference between what I enjoy and what the people need. Years ago, I discovered that my preaching wasn't working at my church. I'm like, this ain't working. This is not working. And so I went to one of my mentors, Dr. Charles Booth, and so I said, Dr. Booth, it ain't working. He said, what do you mean, Derek? You're a great preacher. I said, it's not working. What I'm doing right now is not working. And so, and then I told him what I thought it was, and it was an issue during that season of style, because the congregation had flipped. And when the demographics of the congregation flipped, my style of preaching didn't. And so I was struggling with what they wanted was not something I enjoyed doing. Because I didn't enjoy it. And so y'all have to know Dr. Booth. He said, well, Derek, either you're going to change or you're going to keep being ineffective. It's up to you. So I had to watch this, I had to preach in a way for a season in our church. I had to preach in a way that I didn't enjoy in order to be effective. Because I had to answer the question, is this thing about effectiveness or enjoyment? So I had to shift because the demographics had changed and everything. And one of the things that you don't want to do is be in a situation where you are out of season in your own church. You're out of season in your own church. And then you've got to know, even when you're not preaching, what your church needs. You know, just because they're popular don't mean they need to come to your church. You know, they came, some of my people said, Pastor, when are we going to bring so-and-so and so-and-so? I said, never. They said, why not? I said, because he doesn't offer anything we need. I ain't got no help in this room. We don't need that. Now, when we need that, we'll consider bringing him. But we don't need that. We don't need that. You know, one of my friends called me, you got to have great friends. I'll talk about that later. But one of my friends called me, and see, my friends are trying to figure out what in the world, especially those who are not walking with me on a daily basis. There are really only two men that walk with me on a daily basis. And so those who are on the periphery of my life are trying to figure out, what in the world is Derek Triplett doing? What do you mean you walk away from your church and you don't go to another church? You know, what is he doing? And so so now, one of my friends called me the other day. He said, Trip, are you still freelancing? I say, yeah, G, I'm still, if that's what you call it, I'm still freelance. Okay, I need you in 2 weeks. I need you. Because see, now I'm the guy when bishops and pastors have to leave on a Sunday and it gets out that they're leaving and they don't want their people looking at them crazy because they put up some associate. Now I'm the guy that's free on Sundays, and so they just call me and I drive in or fly in and take care of the Sunday so that the people will be straight. You know, one of my friends, it was going on for years, and even while I was pastor, he would call me. He said, look, man, you know you have to come every year, and this is the Sunday. I got to be gone. They heard I'm going to be gone, and you know I have a $95,000 a week budget. I can't have an off Sunday. So here's what I need to do. I need to announce that you, one of their favorite preachers, is coming to preach so that the people will be in church so that we don't mess up our budget. So I'm freelancing. You got to know what your people need. Here's the next question, and I throw no shade, but here's the next question, gentlemen, ladies. How do we develop a different kind of parishioner than we developed in the last 25 years? Because the kind of parishioner that we've developed over the last 25 years, in many cases, is not fit for what we need today. Ain't nobody talking to me. The kind of parishioner that we've developed, we did it. We did. I've had this discussion with some preachers recently. I said, here's what we did. Over the last 25 years, we created a consumerist, individualized Christianity, where people come as individuals to consume what they need. I come to get my word. I come to get my this. I come, and then the dysfunctional people say stuff like this. I don't even fool with them people. I just come get my word and I leave. I come get my blessing and I leave. I don't even fool with them. And we created it. Because for the last 25 years, we have preached about your blessing, your purpose, your favor. God's got something for you. And so now we've got people who are committed to Christ, but not his cause. And the world needs the church. And the Christians are coming to church because they need the church. And they abandon and abort the very world that needs them. We have developed individualistic, selfish, consumerist. That's why if I don't get what I need from your house, I'll just go to another house. I'll just go to another house. I'll just go. I don't want Wendy's today. I'll go to Burger King. I don't want Burger King today. I want McDonald's. I don't want McDonald's today. I want some Chinese food. I don't want no Chinese food today. I want some Carrabba's. I don't want any Carrabba's today. I want Maggiano's. I'm getting what I need. And if you don't provide me what I need, then I'll find somebody who will. Especially since I can always find one of y'all that don't care nothing about anything but bodies, budgets, buildings. Well, how are we going to develop a better parishioner? A Christian who actually wants to work for the cause of Christ, his cause. We've messed it up. We've messed it up with our Levitical approach to preaching and worship. Everything for the last 20 in the body of Christ, especially in the black church, we just go from one extreme to another. We just go from one extreme to another. So we didn't, 30, 40 years ago, we didn't understand let me say this right, a certain dimension of worship expression. So 30 years ago, everybody started getting praise teams. Everybody started getting, and all of that. 30 years ago, I went through all this stuff. Everybody started getting praise teams. We got rid of devotion, and we started getting praise teams and praise leaders. And then and then about 25 years ago, 20 years ago, we then started developing the superstar praise and worship leaders. And so now we've got to have the superstar praise and worship leader because they know how to lead us into the presence of God better than anybody else. They know how to take us beyond the veil. Wait a minute. The last time I read, when Jesus died, the veil of the temple was rent. So what veil are you talking about? And what we have done in the body of Christ, please, I used to be a preacher who worshiped, and now I'm a worshiper who happens to preach, so I have to shift out of worship real quick. But please understand, what we have done is we come in on Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights and Tuesday nights and re-sew the veil. We re-sew the veil because now because the veil is flesh, and now we can't get into the presence of God unless the right flesh is in front of us. If the right flesh ain't in front of us, then we don't want nothing. We have a bad version of parishioner. We preached all of this, getting into his presence, getting into his presence, getting into his presence. But the last time I checked is that when you got into the presence of God, one, you were purified. That's how I know that there's not an authentic worship going on, because we can't be in the presence of God as much as we claim to be in the presence of God and still be as dysfunctional as we are. Isaiah says, wait a minute, when I got in his presence, after I finished adoring all the stuff, I said, ooh, woe is me. And there's too many of us that we can be jacked up and still never come and say, woe is me. So I know you ain't in the presence as much as you claim. Here's the other thing. When you read, the presence of God was for revelation. Watch this. And the revelation was for purpose. And the purpose was to go obey God in the earth. So God gave you access to his presence so that he could tell you what he wanted you to do. We want worship and no work. We want worship and no work. So we are some of the most individualistic, lazy Christians you have ever seen in your entire life. Here's why. Because in many cases, you know, when you do the kind of stuff I do, you have to get information from a lot of people. One of the people I follow is a businessman by the name of Michael Hyatt. And Michael Hyatt has this premise. He says, always, watch this, and I'll talk about it in the second half. He says, always create margin in your life. He says, the problem with our lives is that there is no margin. Here's what he means. Your life is so full. Your life is so, there's no space left. So you cannot add anything else. You can't even take advantage of opportunities because you have no margin to be spontaneous. How many of you are like me? You live by your calendar. You live. I'm trying to break the habit. I live by my calendar. My wife is trying to adjust because she'll say, well, can we do this on? So I said, well, let me wait. Well, let me see. Or let me call Robin and see, you know, what I got. Because your day, watch this. When your life has no margin, you can't fit nothing else in. Let me ask you a question. If you had a significant opportunity that was going to take 5 hours in next week, do you have it? Or is something else going to have to be given up in order, because you have scheduled yourself into everything? So the reason we can't get y'all to do any kingdom work is your life is so full. And you put your schedule together so that God could bless it. Not so you could work for him. Pastor, I got stuff to do. I got stuff to do. I'm sorry. I'd love to be there. I'd love to, I'd really love to help with that. I'd love to, but I have, I got this and that, and I'm getting this degree and I'm getting that, and I got the kids, and then I got sorority meeting, I got fraternity meeting, and then the kids got after school, and they got basketball and this and that and that. Pastor, I'd love to help with the cause of Christ, but I have a life. You said it last night. We're entangled by the cares of the world that we've created and called them blessings. Do you actually think God's going to keep blessing us with the stuff we use to kick him to the curb? Ain't nobody talking to me now. Do you actually think God's going to keep blessing you with stuff that you're going to use as the reason you ain't got no time to work for him? We got to raise a different kind of parishioner. Let me hurry. I got to hurry. Watch this. If I don't get to it, here's what I want to deal with. This whole shifting the church for kingdom opportunity. If I don't get to everything, I want to, talk about a sense of urgency. A sense of urgency. 2, I want to talk about increased spirituality. 3, I want to talk about managing scrutiny. Managing scrutiny. And then 4, I want to talk about structure. And then 5, I want to talk about systems. Okay? So sense of urgency, increased spirituality, scrutiny, structure, systems. I recently moved out of Daytona and moved right outside of Orlando. And so I'm starting to get used to the new city. So I'm driving down the street and I go into this little complex to have lunch where this little restaurant is. And so there's this storefront church in this little complex. I look on the glass door, and the name of the church mother was The Answer Christian Church. The Answer Christian Church. And I was like, oh, that's kind of bold. That's a little bit presumptive. And then as I was eating, the Spirit began to deal with me. And he said, that's what all y'all supposed to be. The answer. And you are supposed to have your stuff together so well that you can announce you got the answer. The answer. Now, I must warn you now, and I'll get to this a little later. I must warn you now that as the song we sang as children, that's true. Watch this. Jesus is the answer. It's not the church. Jesus is the answer. It ain't your congregation. Because, watch this, in the context of today's culture, there's too much about your church and your congregation and even Christianity that I can debate you on. And you're going to lose. And when you're losing, you're going to get defensive and then just get mad and send me to hell. Come on. When we can't defend this thing we love so much, called the church, called the Bible, called whatever version of Christianity that we give our life to, when we can't defend it, and when they start calling us on our stuff, and when they start calling us on all of what they perceive as the inconsistencies of church and the Christian movement across generations, when they start pulling out stuff on us, not just scandal, but when they start talking about, well, why are there religious wars? Why have Christians killed hundreds upon hundreds of people? Why are we doing that? And we don't have an intelligent answer, and then they start pushing us. And then when they start pushing us on our own inconsistencies, why don't y'all love people? Why are church people so mean? Why are church people so that? Why are they the king and queen gossipers? Why aren't they loved? You know, there is who wrote the book a few years ago, the book called The Unchurched, and they did, and remember in The Unchurched, in the intro, they said that the problem that America has with American Christians, not world, because we talk about the world is different than America. This is America, and America has some issues. Watch this. And the book said that the reason that America is turned off by the church is that the church is always talking about what it's against and never what it's for. The church is always talking about what it's against and never what it's for. And so when people back us into a corner, we get mad. Why? Because church is personal to us. We've given our life to this. So you are going to attack something that I love so much. And so now I'm offended, and then I get mad, and then I send you to hell. I'll tell you what, if you don't believe, the Bible says every knee gonna bow, and that's your cop out. Because you mad because they just painted you into a corner and you can't get out. We got to be the answer. But Jesus is the answer. It ain't the church. It ain't the church. The church ain't even the answer for some of us. And it's becoming less and less the answer for millennials. And I don't want to get on the whole millennial thing, and that I think we're going too far with that sometimes as well. But I will say this: there are some millennials. I have two. One is in worse shape than the other. You know, my children are 26 and 24. And now 21 and 10. My stepchildren are 21 and 10. But my 26-year-old and 24-year-old are struggling. They love God. They love God. They love the Word of God. They know sound preaching. They know authentic anointing. They're struggling with church right now. And they're struggling with church for different reasons. My daughter's struggling with church because she's my baby. And this is why she's struggling. And watch this. She went, both of my kids are University of Florida graduates, and then both of them ended up in Atlanta. Both of them ended up in Atlanta. My daughter went and got her master's up there, and then she started teaching school. And my son's in advertising. He's an account planner for a large multinational corporation. And so, but when my daughter got up there, she went and joined a very, 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 very popular church, a very, 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 very popular preacher. And so she was the middle school youth leader. She said, "Daddy, I know I've always done children, but I'm gonna stretch myself and do youth." And so, unfortunately, when you work in church, you see behind the curtain. And what we've discovered late is she's like her mom. She's not built to see behind the curtain. She's not built for it. She is not built for. Some people are for the restaurant. They are not for the kitchen. Jake says, everybody can work in the restaurant, can't work in the kitchen. Here's what I would do when I hired people. In the interview process, I would tell them, if you're going to work in church, you have to have the capacity and the ability to see people at their worst and then respect them at their best. If you do not have the capacity to do that, you should not work in church. Whether you are an active unpaid staff person or you know, and I won't get into my staff development stuff, because whether you're paid or unpaid, every leader is staff. And you have to teach them, train them, and help hold them accountable just like you would somebody you're giving a check. There is no such thing as volunteer. It's called service. And you said you were serving the Lord. Okay? But here, my daughter struggles. She's not built. She's not built to see it. The other thing she's struggling, she's my baby. So I raised my kids on my own passion. I have a passion to change the world. That is my passion. My passion is not bodies, budgets, and buildings and all that. No. My passion is I want something that wasn't there or wasn't right or wasn't perfected before I got there. And then God used me to help either put it there, fix it, make it right, so that people have a chance to become their best self. So my daughter's struggling now because all the church wants to do is have church. She's ready to work. They ain't got no real work for her to do. And all the real work that they want to make her fatigued in doing has to do with church. Now, I put my son there. I put my spiritual son there. She grew up with him, loves him like a brother. But she's like, Daddy, I'm about to be done with this. I'm about to be done with this because, and she's there. She lived overseas for a while, came back home, and when I decided to transition to church, she said, Dad, I'm going to stay here with you for a year, make sure you're good, make sure you're all right. We're going to do some stuff. I'm going to help you get this business off the ground and all of that kind of stuff. And so she's at my church, having church. And she don't want to go. She don't want to go because that ain't important to her. That ain't important to her. When she was searching for churches in Atlanta, it was funny. I'm sitting in my office in between services. I get a text from my daughter. She said, Daddy, if this man say one more time in this sermon that your situation is not your destination, I am out of here. She said, if he say this one more time, I am out of here. I know that. And so my brilliant young adults start coming to me and saying, Pastor, when is the church going to speak to us? We were raised right. We are educated. We want to do something because we got to admit it. Most times we preach to the lowest denominator. We preach to the lowest denominator. Yes, everybody needs encouragement and all of that. But please understand, sometimes it's not encouragement, it's empowerment. We preach to the lowest common denominator. Everybody who's struggling, everybody, no matter what, we stand up on Sunday morning after Sunday morning, no matter what you went through this week, God got you through. What if I just had the best week of my life? What if God just made my dreams come true? When is the church going to speak to me? And then we do this dump. I'm sorry. I was dealing with this in a church a few weeks ago, I was preaching. They were doing their end of the year revival, and I was closing out. As a matter of fact, it was John and I, and he does this to me all the time. He was on for 2 nights, and he called me, Trip, I ain't gonna make that second night. I made a scheduling snafu, so they're gonna be calling you. So I'm preaching to close out the revival that he was supposed to do. And so then when I finished, the pastor said, what you doing watch night? I said, we haven't decided yet. Okay, I need you to preach watch night. Because one of the things we talked about was this. We preach against our own theology every December 31st. We preach against our own theology. And we set people up for failure. Our own theology is that God operates in kairos, not chronos. That is our theology, that God operates in kairos, not chronos. But then every December 31st, we stand up and say, this new year, and this is going to be your year, and this, and then turn the page. The chapter is over. But you preached and taught that God does not work on a watch or a calendar. He works in times and seasons. And so then we tell people, and everything that messed with you in last year, but how many of you can be a witness? There's some stuff that you thought you left in 2015. It followed you into 2016. And there's some stuff that you declared that you had gotten rid of in 2016. And they said, no, we ain't through. We're not through. But we preach that and we hype you up. And either we don't know or have forgotten it ain't true. And then guess what? Here's the flip side, because we preach the lowest common denominator. Guess what? What if in the middle of all the craziness, I just had the best year of my life? And now I got to hear my preacher tell me that's over. You feeling me? I just had the best year of my life, and now you telling me, because we going into a new year, oh, that's over. But we preach under the presumption that everybody is struggling. She's struggling. They having church every Sunday. And so she comes, she says, she says, I'm doing it because I know I'm supposed to, which is bad. Because now that becomes religion. She says, Daddy, I'm going because I know I'm supposed to. And, and I love John Paul, and that's my brother and all that, but I'm sick of this. My son has the other issue. I almost brought it up in the conversation yesterday. My son has the other issue. He goes to a large church in Atlanta that is a multi-ethnic church, large multi-ethnic church. And so several locations and all of this kind of stuff. So he came home for Christmas. He said, Dad, I got to find another church. I said, why? He said, you put something out on Instagram, and I was feeling you, and then just what you said happened. I said, well, what happened, son? Because I put out, I said, because one of the struggles I have now is I have to find a church. I have to find a new church home. I don't go to my church because I want to stay out of my son's way. So I got to find a new church home. So I go place to place, and so I put on Instagram. I said, I don't know where I'm going to church. It was a week after the election, Sunday after the election. I said, I don't know where I'm going to church Sunday, but wherever I am, if he or she starts closing and hooping and talking about, don't worry about the president because God is on the throne, no, I'm leaving. I said, I'm getting up, and I'm big about order. I stay to the benediction no matter how painful it is, because I want my parting blessing. I want my parting blessing. I want my parting blessing. But I said, no, I'm leaving. I'm leaving. Because that is not what we need the day after this foolishness. God was king during slavery. God was still on the throne during Jim Crow. God was on the throne April 4th, 1968. God was still on the throne, so you got to tell me something else other than God still on the throne. They got the president, but I serve the king. No, dude, I need more than that. You're going to have to explain to me what we supposed to be doing right now. You know, I was doing a leadership thing for my dad's church, and he got nervous because I said something. He said, oh, Lord, what just happened to my son? I said, listen, 81% of the evangelicals voted for Trump. 81%. So one of two things has happened. Either they don't know the God I know. They can't know the God I know. That's one possibility. I don't have a lot of answers. I'm big on hypotheticals. That's one hypothetical. Or here's the other hypothetical. And I said it, and my dad's like, oh, Lord, what happened to my son? I said, or if we do serve the same God, I need him to start answering some prayers on this side of the tracks. Because he seems to be answering their prayers pretty well. My dad's like, oh, Lord, let me lay hands on my child. Here's my point. You're going to have a hard time arguing the love of Jesus and the love of God to people who are watching us suffer under the hands of oppressive leaders over. You got to come up with some other answers other than the king's on the throne. That's real churchy, and it's a good cheap shout. But you better come with something else. And so he says, Daddy, the dude did it. He said that. And my son said, and Daddy, I know why. I said, why, Donovan? Because he couldn't say much with the white people in the congregation who help fund all. So I have created a culture, because churches really aren't multicultural. Because there's a church sets its culture. They are multi-ethnic. And when you are in a multi-ethnic situation as a black pastor and you have a good percentage of whites coming to your church, then it handcuffs you when dealing with certain issues if they can't handle it, especially when you have built a ministry that is so over budgeted that you cannot have anybody disagree with you and keep their money. So we have to preach something that everybody can like, your purpose, your destiny. Preach something that everybody can like so that we don't rock the boat. Now here is how we play. Here's how we play the game. We got all of this stuff we're doing for people, so we are blessing people, but we need the money to keep all of these buildings afloat and to keep all of these ministries afloat. That's why I'm encouraging pastors now, do not extend your budget to the point that it muzzles your prophetic voice. You can't have a budget that closes your mouth. So before you get excited about buying that next building and doing this and doing that and doing this, ask yourself, will I still have some margin so that if somebody gets mad at a sermon, I'm still good. Here's why. Please be seated. I'm not supposed to raise my voice in this session. They're having problems. They're having problems. They're struggling. They're struggling because what we hold dear, they hold dear, but that ain't all they want. We hold it dear, watch this, because church is a part of our personal portfolio where they want God to rule their life. Church is what we've added to the rest of the stuff we do. It's their portfolio. It is one of the reasons, pastors, that we can't keep a lot of white members. I went through the whole thing. Because when I started our church 21 years ago, 22 years ago, we're going to be multicultural. We're going to do all this. And, I had the #1 teaching show in our area on a white radio station. So white people used to flood my Bible study and all of that. And so I said, let me figure out. And so I was in Full Gospel at the time. And so I took my staff and we flew to Denver. We flew to Denver to go to Heritage Christian Center to meet with the staff and to meet with Dennis Leonard. Because in my eyes, he was the #1 person at that time. We're talking about, 95, 96, who had a real mixed, for real, congregation. And we spent 2 days at Heritage. Cost me a whole lot of money, but staff development costs. So took my staff. It wasn't enough for me to go. It wasn't enough for me to go. This was not something I could come back home and tell them about. This is something that we all needed to see and hear together. So 5 of us flew up there. And so we went through all this stuff. And then I had a conversation with Bishop. And he said, I wasn't even a bishop at that time. I was an overseer. He said, overseer, listen. He said, I applaud you, but let me tell you straight up. And I thank him to this day. He says, it's easier for me to do this than you to do this. He says, because your people will follow us. Your people will follow us. Our people will not follow you in the same percentages. I know there's some word of faith things that are some exceptions. Malcolm Gladwell talks about the outliers. There's some outliers. But on average, he says it's going to be rough. He says, I will tell you also, he says that when I first announced what we were doing and what God has sent me to do, he says, I lost 200 families. Not people, families. He said, I lost 200 families. He said, so there's going to be some issues and blah, blah, blah. And he was right. And then I'm like, God, what is the philosophy or what is the theology behind this? And here is what I got. Watch this. White people who love the Lord as they do, church, whatever church they're part of, is a part of their whole life. It's a part of their whole life. And God says there are some of them who can't tell their co-workers and their mama and their daddy and that hey, that's my pastor. See, we're very compartmentalized in church. Church is not really interwoven into all of our parishioners' lives. It is no big deal. The average black person, their family don't care who their pastor is. Oh, you go over there? Okay, hope you're enjoying it. They don't care about that. Because for us, it's not a part of our identity. For white people, their church is a part of their identity. And if you being their pastor and this being their church if they can't sell that to the broader aspect of their life, then they will enjoy you and visit you consistently, but they will not become a part of you because they cannot explain that to the rest of their life. One of my white members years ago, Terry, her father died. Her father died. And so she came to me and she said, Pastor, my dad died, and he wasn't a member of a church. Would you do the funeral for me? I said, of course, T. So I show up at the white funeral home. I get to the door. There's a very nice gentleman who cracked the door and said, may I help you? You're obviously out of place. He says, may I help you? I said, I'm the preacher for the whatever her dad's name. He's like, really? And then he said, then he became very welcoming. Took me in, everything, blah, 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 blah. Terry gets up, this is my pastor. Funeral lasted 20 minutes. 20 minutes. 20 minutes. I was received very well. I was trained very well, so I knew how to preach. I knew how to dress. I knew, back then, skins and all of that was in style, and the wide leg suits and all that. No, you don't go to there in gaiters and looking all crazy like you are the image of what they perceive black preaching is on TV. You don't go there and make all of their stereotypes true. So I go, I do my little thing, I'm up out. Here is what blessed me. I'm leaving, and the funeral director said, Reverend, wait a minute. I said, yes, ma'am. She says, here's your envelope. I had a Scooby-Doo moment. I'm like, what? My envelope? $20 minutes and an envelope? I said, ma'am, what is this for? She says, oh no, it is a part of our planning. You plan for the plot, the burial, all that, and the preacher. She says, oh no, this is in our family, this is in our family plan. And I'm like, okay, can y'all do some seminars for the black funeral homes? Because see, the black people think that it's my pastoral duty to stay here for 3 hours for Pookie. Huh? Black folk think, oh, that's you, the pastor. That's what you're supposed to do. Stay here for 3 hours. Everybody know I'm lying. Come on, y'all. Y'all know that sometimes we at least have to put a question in the air so that the family won't be upset. Nobody knows what's going to happen, and y'all know we have to do that. My first church, my first church, I don't know if it was me or it was God. I'll take it was God. In my first church, like the first year, just people was just dying. All these funerals. But I did learn years ago that sometimes you cannot move ahead as a pastor until you get some necessary funerals. That's a whole nother thing. That's a whole nother thing. That's a whole nother thing. But so all these people are dying, but I'm just getting there. I'm 23. I don't know them. And so finally one of the mothers came to me after about the third one. She says, son, it's obvious that you don't know them people in them caskets. We know them. And all that what you were saying about them ain't gonna happen. Let me get to what I need to get to. Y'all play too much. Y'all play too much. Check this out. We've got to get to this issue. These kids are having difficulties. So, with that in mind, I want you to understand that right now, this is a moment. God works in times and seasons. He also works in moments. In America right now, it's probably in about 30, 40 minutes, that clown's going to get inaugurated. Okay? This is a moment. This is a moment. Your church has got to perceive the times. This is a moment. One of the things that I do, tomorrow or Sunday, I'll go preach for one of my sons. The church is struggling, and so I'm going to go and try to speak life into the ministry. And so one of the things that I said to them, I visited them a few weeks ago, and one of the things that I said to them is that because I'm an insider, but now I no longer do church leadership, in that I now have the lens of an outsider. So I have 30 years of experience as an insider, but now I have the lens. John Gunn said to me, he said, man, he says, your ear and your eyes have never been clearer, ever. He says, not pastoring has freed you up to see things that you didn't see before, and to hear things. And so now I look into churches as an outsider who knows the inside. And so I know right now, and I told my church, I told one of my son's churches, I said, listen, you have no idea how badly the world needs church. These people need Jesus. They need some love. This is a moment where we get the opportunity to win, hear me, or lose. God's church is not going to lose. Gates of hell will not prevail. But some congregations can lose. See, your church can die while the church is living. So you can't just declare upon this rock, because he didn't say, upon this rock I'll build your congregation. He said, upon this rock I'll build my church. If you go back to some of the previous questions, is that if your church does not understand its kingdom assignment in the region of the church where you are, then he can let your church die, because you ain't playing your position. And people who don't play their position get benched. If you play left tackle and you keep letting my quarterback get sacked, I'm going to bench you. Now, if we win the Super Bowl, you get your check and you get a ring and you get the celebration, but you ain't help us win. And whatever church I'm a part of, I want it to be a church that's helping win. This is a moment, which means that we've got to develop a sense of urgency. This is an urgent moment. You know, you can tell people who live life urgent. I'm not saying panic. Urgent. You know, we were coming from the airport yesterday. Person was slow in front of us. Harrison said, "Oh, I see they on a tour." Because they driving with nowhere to go. Some of our churches just on tour. We driving with no sense of urgency because we have nowhere to go. Yes, sir. Yes. Yes, yes. How much time I got? Come back at 11. So let me take 5 minutes, and then we'll break at 10 minutes to 11, and then we'll come back at 11, and then we'll open the first session with Q&A. Okay? One of my favorite business authors, Cotter wrote a book called The Sense of Urgency. I want to quote him. Watch this. True urgency is a gut-level determination to move and win now. True urgency is a gut-level determination to move and win now. They are alert and come to work every day to achieve something important, and they shed irrelevant to move faster and smarter. They are not stressed out and anxious, generating great activity without productivity. People with a true sense of urgency move boldly toward the future. We're not doing activity, we're doing productivity. We're doing too many of us are doing activity, and the church is worn out with activity that did not produce nothing. The aim of the church, watch this, the aim of the church right now in this season is influence. I'll explain this and then we're going to break. That's the aim of the church. The world needs us to influence the culture. To influence the culture. Not just to save souls, but to influence the culture. Whatever is able to influence the culture. Let me see if I can get you to understand this. There's another word that sounds like influence. I'm big on etymologies. There's another word that sounds like influence. It's influenza. I want to show you something. The flu, once you have it, it spreads to any other living organism that you come in contact with. And the only way it doesn't is that they have antibodies of resistance that don't allow them to get sick. You don't have to try to spread the flu. Ain't nobody talking to me in here. If you just go on about your day, they gonna catch it. Those of you daycare teachers, my daughter, she switched from 3rd grade to kindergarten. Guess what? If one person in the class sick, everybody gonna get, half the class gonna get sick right now. Those of you who want the Steelers to win, 15 Steeler players have had the flu this week because the flu went through the locker room. Nobody tried to give anybody the flu. It just spreads. Why? Because it's a virus. A virus spreads to every living organism that it comes in contact with that's available. You don't have to try. Watch this. When we get a real big hit on social media, we say it's gone viral because somebody saw it, then somebody shared it, and then it just keeps going. Watch this. The original person who posted it did not post it to all of those 4,000 people. Somebody saw it, they saw it, they saw it. The church is supposed to influence the world so that we put our stuff out there. So even if I don't preach a sermon to you, I have conditioned your mind and conditioned your heart that you start just doing stuff and you don't even know why you're doing it. It's something just influenced you. Those of you who have pastored or who have parented kids in the last 20 years, you know middle school is the fork in the road. Middle school is the fork in the road. Why? Influence. Because now your child is getting influence externally and internally. They're getting influenced by growing hormones that they didn't have before. And then they've got people around them who want to now help them. Stuff your kids never knew, they now go to school and know because of influence. That's flipping. That's what the church is supposed to be doing. That people have been influenced by us and they don't even know it. Hip hop started as underground in the streets. What's the show on Netflix? The history of hip hop. I'm sorry, y'all say. But it started underground. It spread so much over the last 30 years that now you can't cut on the TV and watch anything, a commercial, nothing, without hip-hop. It's gone viral. Why hasn't the church? We're going to break. We'll be back at 11 o'clock, and we'll start with questions.
Let's see. First of all, before y'all break up out of here, was I telling y'all the truth about this dude right here? Listen, those of you who need to get your pictures taken, my staff is